Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I got started on Phase 4. I started with a temporary aluminum factory. I then transitioned to a permanent one after unlocking all of the Tier 7 milestones and a couple in Tier 8. I now have access to Mark 5 belts and Mark 3 miners, making it much easier to scale things up and get everything I can out of the nodes. My aluminum factory produces aluminum sheets and casings for my dimensional depots, and almost 1,800 ingots for future factories. Adding all of that has brought me within about 6,000 megawatts of my power production. I think this is a good time to create some more so that I just don't have to worry about it. Rocket fuel is an amazing power source that is incredibly efficient with crude oil. Before I head out to the blue crater where we're going to be making that rocket fuel, we're starting today off here at the hub. In all that running around the red forest and the bamboo jungle there, I picked up quite a few slugs. I killed quite a few critters, and my hog remains are just about completely full, so need to empty this. And yeah, I completely filled up on leaves and wood. So time to replenish all of this stuff. Drop it all here in the container and watch everything come to life. I never get tired of seeing just a line of power shards and DNA capsules. Besides my dimensional depot being completely full, I have quite a few power shards. Besides emptying all my pockets and wanting to get a few more coupon points, there's actually another reason I came back to the hub. And that is the good old MAM. So let's come in here, and the one we need is in the sulfur tree. For the rocket fuel, it is an alternate, but we get to just manually pick it, and I don't have to keep scanning all the hard drives for it. So let's go ahead and add it to the to-do list. Still got plenty of hard drives, more than enough packaged turbo fuel. When I was cleaning everything up with my temporary aluminum setup, I was able to just hoard a bunch of aluminum ingots and put them in my dimensional depot. So thankfully I have plenty, and I actually don't think I need to take them out of here. I just need to head over to the crafting bench here, and I just need 10. Rocket fuel is so good.
Warning, mixing rocket fuel into coffee does not enhance its energizing effect.
I don't know how, but we should test it. Well, while we're here, let me just do another quick look. And you know what? I think it's about time we unlock this one, because I should have plenty. 65, I think we'll go ahead and just unlock that. Grab some SAM. That one gave me 5 stacks. This one gives me the 240 per minute. These two make a big difference. And I still have 19 Mercer spheres left over. Feels good to finally have this taken care of. Still haven't made these things yet. Maybe one day. Cerium, yeah, we can just leave those till the end. That isn't until next phase. And, well, you know, while we're here, might as well unlock the turbo rifle ammo. I had plenty of all of this stuff, so let's just take care of this.
Turbo rifle ammo unlocked. The pioneer ammo of choice when obstacles are numerous and time is short. Panic and imminent death often negatively affect human accuracy, so this ammo meets the human experience with fix-it efficiency.
Normally my default ammo is the homing rifle ammo, because for the most part you can just fire it in the vague direction and it works and it's great. So I wanted to automate this one first and give it a solid try before I go back to my old ways and only use the homing rifle ammo. I won't be setting it up in this video, but pretty soon I think I'll get that up and running. So the machine's already in place downstairs. Made good progress on the MAM, and it let me scan another one, so we'll just keep scanning hard drives until I can. And we're back in the blue crater. So we've got the train station over there, and then if we pan over here to the right, we've got the petroleum coke factory. That is only using one normal node, and there are quite a few other nodes down here. And today I'm going to be using 2 of those nodes. the fuel plant itself is only going to use one normal node. I'll need 300 crude oil. And let's go ahead and go over the plan real quick. Rocket fuel is an amazing fuel source for both power and your jetpack. I still really like the liquid biofuel, but the rocket fuel sure does let you go fast. I'm going to be using the nitro rocket fuel alternate recipe. Instead of combining turbo fuel and nitric acid in a blender, I'll still be using a blender, but I'm going to take normal fuel, nitrogen gas, sulfur, and coal, basically letting me skip creating the turbo fuel and just throw all of the same parts into a blender. And out of 300 crude oil, I can make 1200 rocket fuel, and it will have a byproduct of compacted coal. And I'm going to use that later on in the video, but for now, we're not going to worry about it. I'm just going to set up a sink to take care of both that and the polymer resin that's coming from the very first step, making the heavy oil residue. Making the fuel is pretty easy. Now that I have blenders, I don't need to use the package diluted fuel alternate recipe. I can cut out the packages altogether, just use a blender, and use the diluted fuel alternate recipe. It definitely helps simplify things. And if you take a look at the total amount of machines I need, besides the fuel power generators, it's very few. With the power shards, I can bring the number down to only needing 4 for each of those recipes. And then I am definitely going to be using some more power shards with the fuel power generators. Instead of 288, I'm only going to be placing down 128, because that is a nice multiple of 4. The interesting thing about the blue crater is the best real estate is also the part that you want to use for your water extractors. Even though I don't need too many water extractors, I'm going to go ahead and just put this right here on the water. It does take up some of the valuable real estate for water, but I think I'll be fine. This is going to give me a nice centerpiece for the location, and it's going to be hard to miss from just about anywhere. First step, foundations, and then we'll go over the blueprints. I build pretty much all of my factories on the world grid, which means that they're all aligned in the exact same direction, north, south, east, and west, basically. So this time I really decided to live life on the edge, and I tilted it at a 45-degree angle. I know, getting crazy here. But it also allowed me to put basically 2 of the pieces on either side of this thing and kind of work around that as a feature. And then bringing in all of the resources will be a little bit more interesting this way, and I think it'll be a fun challenge, and hopefully it looks good. Before we dive into why it's shaped like that, let's go through the whole process here. The first step is a refinery. This is going to be using heavy oil residue, and it's going to be overclocked to 250%. So it'll intake 75 and output 100. And 75 is 1/4 of the amount of the crude oil I'm going to be bringing in. The next step is a blender. That's going to be using the diluted fuel alternate recipe. This one's going to be overclocked to 200%. It'll intake the 100 heavy oil residue coming from this refinery. I'll need to bring in 200 water, which can be done with just 1 water extractor, and that'll produce 200 fuel. That fuel is then going to go into another blender, and this one is going to be using the nitro rocket fuel alternate recipe, also overclocked to 200%. That'll intake 200 fuel. I need to bring in 150 nitrogen gas. So if we multiply this by 4, since I'm going to be doing 4 sets of these systems, I'm going to need 600 nitrogen gas, 200 sulfur. So unfortunately, that means I need 800 sulfur in total, which means I need more than 1 belt because my max is 780. Because of course that's how the numbers work out. But that's okay. It's going to be worth it. And then 100 coal for each one of these. So only 400 in total. That's going to be pretty easy. For 300 rocket fuel, if I just throw down a fuel power generator real quickly, we can take a look. Because if you open it up, it'll tell you what the burn rate is for all of these. So rocket fuel being 4.167, I think we can all kind of guess that that's probably 4.16 repeating is most likely what that is, which is 4 1/6. So if I'm making 300 divided by 4.1666, if you add enough of them, there we go. So for each one of these blenders, I can power 72 fuel generators. That is a bit much. So fully overclocked, I could bring it down to 28.8. obviously I don't want to work with that number. And because of the way that I want to do the blueprints, the next multiple of 4 would be 32. And so that's how many I'm going to use for each one of these setups. For each one of these 3 machines, it'll fuel 32 of those fuel generators. So now that you know the process, let me show you the blueprints I've come up with. Even though it's a little bit spread out, this is taking up relatively little real estate, and that's because we're going to do some more towers. Because I love my towers in this save. And this is what I've come up with for the first floor. Some of these decisions probably won't make a lot of sense until later, because you'll just have to wait and see to find out why I put the door on the 7th foundation up. But that's how we get in here. And, oh, how embarrassing. My blenders are naked. Well, that's really distracting. And can I clear it and retry? Whew, okay, much better. No! Alright, well, I guess it would be better just to show you outside of the blueprint designer then. Alright, so the way the foundations went, all of these are 5x5 blueprints. And I just wanted to make sure I gave them a little bit of space so that the towers weren't just kind of all crammed right on top of each other. Wanted to be able to see through them and whatnot. The very center is going to get busy and probably pretty ugly, since I'm going to be bringing things in most likely on the world grid, but this is rotated 45 degrees, so things are going to get a little bit interesting. So I want to be able to hide some of the ugly stuff, and that's what's going to happen here. And then we'll send everything out. And since I'm going to have 4 towers, thankfully load balancing that is real easy. It's just going to take up a lot of space with how many different things I have to do it with. Each one of these blocks is a foundation. So now in blueprint mode, I can just slap this right on top. And let's see if my blenders show up now. Well, I guess maybe when I reload the save. I'm sure eventually my blenders will put some clothes on. This should be easier to go over everything, but for some reason this is just so distracting and it just looks so wrong that it's just hard to go over. So let me place all 4 of these and then we'll just save and reload. So I want the doors facing inwards. Well, it makes no sense, but now that I placed all 4 of the blueprints, the blenders magically appeared. So let's go over them. It did get a little bit cramped, and that's because this is like the 5th different iteration I came up with, trying to get everything just right and the way that I wanted. You know, when I initially set it up, I didn't have the industrial fluid buffer. And thank you so much to the comment suggesting it. It was a great idea and definitely saved me a whole lot of time on the startup. So let's start here down at the very bottom. And there is actually a door for this one up on the 2nd foundation. So now you can come in here and drop down. This front wall is where everything plugs in. And you may have noticed right here, if you look real closely, it's actually offset ever so slightly. So it's a little bit harder to show because it's not in the blueprint designer anymore. But if this was in the blueprint designer, if you took a conveyor wall hole, you can't place one on the very outside if the wall is right up at the very edge of the blueprint designer. Same thing with the pipeline wall holes. So what I did was place it on the very edge, hit H to lock it, and then holding control, I was able to nudge it into that place. So it's only a 1/2 meter nudge back, but without this beam here, you can definitely tell. With the beam, it hides it pretty well. Even though there's only 4 towers, it was just going to make it a whole lot easier if I could do this ahead of time and add all of the labels. The ones in red are inputs, and the ones in green are the outputs. Alright, so if we come inside, everything is still somewhat color coordinated to make it hopefully a little bit easier to see. We've got the water, that comes up, goes to the diluted fuel blender. These ones are outputs, and yeah, so everything is pretty straightforward down here, but thought I should show it off at least. And so if we come back up to the top level, here it is upstairs. So part of the reason I needed to do that is there just wasn't going to be a ton of space. Normally, I don't really like to do logistics floors just because I like watching all of the products move around. With this factory, half of the products are either liquids or gases, and you don't really get to see a whole lot going on, especially if you're using the clean pipes. And I just really wanted to get this to all fit into one blueprint. Being able to have that space underneath to do those logistics made everything so much easier. Alright, so the heavy oil residue comes up and over the polymer resin and then gets fed into the blender. The water then gets plugged into the blender. This makes the fuel. The fuel then plugs right into this blender, which then has the nitrogen gas, the sulfur, and the coal. And then this outputs the rocket fuel. The gas will go up and over because these things are awkwardly shaped. I wanted to be able to spin this at a 45-degree angle so much, but because it's a square bounding box, it wouldn't fit in the blueprinter like that. Everything else would have been so much cleaner if I could have rotated this at a 45-degree angle, but trying to put it in the corner and rotate it like that just wasn't going to work. So this is what I came up with. It plugs in on this side, and then on the opposite side, we go down underneath. We go around some belts, and then we go up. And then the pipe just ends right here. In case you ever want to do something like this for your blueprints, because the idea is for this to work with the blueprint auto connect. The next floor is going to be set on top of foundations, and there's going to be a floor hole at the bottom. So if we delete all these, I zooped it straight up. So there's a floor hole there. So what I did to get this to work is then I just placed a floor hole here. I had this pipe, instead of doing this, I'll just redo the whole thing. I just go floor hole to floor hole. So now you have a pipe that goes straight up. But if I delete this floor hole, it's going to delete the whole pipe. So I just need to cut it off early. And if I place a pipeline junction, that cuts it in 2 halves. So now I can delete my floor hole and that foundation. And I can just get rid of my pipeline junction. And I've got a pipe that just goes straight up. And now I can grab a valve, and we want things to flow up this way. And we're going to spin it in this. Yeah, we got it lined up with all those. There we go. It is going to start off completely closed. So the idea with this setup is I'm going to get everything running. I am going to completely fill up the industrial storage buffer, which is also going to be filled up all the way up to the valve. And then everything above it is going to be empty. And that's to make the startup a little bit faster. And it should work out pretty well because these hold 2,400 in storage. The fuel power generators are just like any other machine, and for liquids or gases, they have an internal storage of 50. So if I'm going to place 32 of these, and they can each hold 50, if I have a buffer of at least 1,600 built up, when I release this valve, it's still going to have to basically manifold through the entire tower. I may be a little bit crazy about load balancing and ratio splits, but I'm not crazy enough to try it with fluids yet. But this should make it so I can pretty much just open up the valve. All the machines, even when they're completely powered on, are only going to be using 300, but the flow rate for the Mark II pipes is 600. So my thinking is by building up a huge stockpile, even though it does have to manifold, I'm going to be able to send twice as much through, and I'll still have a little bit of a buffer afterwards. And hopefully this should just make the whole startup process a little bit faster and smoother. Let me show you the next step and kind of how it all comes together. Alright, so now in Blueprint Auto Connect, I'm going to place it here, and I'm going to lock it in place. And if we come down here, now we can see that the Blueprint Auto Connect will auto-fill in this pipe. So we click it once, and then twice. So thankfully, the Auto Connect will work with an open pipe as long as it's leading straight into a floor hole. And here's the first floor of the fueled power generators. So again, we've got our door right here in the middle. And then we'll have walkways that can take us all the way around. That way I can check on each one of these. They're going to be overclocked to 225%. So each one will put out 562.5. The rocket fuel is going to come up through here. It'll hit the pipeline junction. So 1/3 comes over to here. And then I just have the fuel power generators just slammed right up next to each other. And then it'll just do the same thing. It'll go up to the next floor. And since this is going to be like my main power plant for a while probably, I wanted to make sure things were looking nice. And so this is what I came up with to deal with all of the smoke. So this right here is using that pillar trick where you just place one. And then if you hold control, you can nudge it by that, I don't know, 5 or 10 degrees. And then if I put it in zoop, I can zoop it straight down and then just delete that top one, and then we can just keep rotating it and doing this over and over again. And I just obviously made that a blueprint, but as you can kind of see, if you just continue it, it'll just make this circle. So kind of like in my aluminum factory, but instead of using the pipes, I decided to use this as like the main air duct, I guess, and then have the fans plugged into those. And then these aren't quite clipping, so, you know, hopefully the smoke just goes straight up into this. Probably won't exactly line up like I want, but you know, it's probably close. The smoke never goes straight up, it always like wafts to the side a little bit, but I can hope that it looks good. What I also want is some fans on the outside. Now, I put these beams here basically as just place markers. When it's time for decorating, I'm gonna line these up and put them like right here on the corner. Now, I think that might be, yeah, it's gonna kind of poke through. Obviously, with the next floor on here, you barely be able to see it, but I don't like it. So we're gonna nudge it just a ½ meter down so that it's not clipping into the beam, but it's at the end of this pillar thing. So that's kind of how thematically it's all gonna work out. I'm getting the smoke out of here this time. I'm not sure if I want to keep the concrete floors, but I wanted the bottom floor to be different, and I had already decided to make this one red and yellow. Now, as you'll see, I decided to go with the basic 1 meter walls because you get this pattern instead, where it's just the nice little lines going up and down, which look very different from just the normal wall. The normal wall has a lot more going on, and I just really wanted the plain look of the 1 meter walls. Now, the downside to doing this is you increase the cost by 4 times. Because if we look, one 1 meter wall is 2 concrete and 2 iron plates. If I switch to the 4 meter wall, it is still 2 concrete and 2 iron plates. And to take up the same amount of space, you need 4 of those. So yeah, this blueprint is stupid expensive. This blueprint is actually too expensive for me to just place out of my dimensional depot. Even though I've expanded it and it has the max 5 stacks, with iron plates, that means I'll only have 1,000 at any given time. Whoops. It is projects like this that I do have, you know, some sort of storage instead of only having dimensional depots. So I could hop on my train, go over to where I'm making the iron plates, and just fill up a freight car. And that would probably help offset it all, and I could get most of this placed. Or I could just come right around here, and hey look, there's an iron node. And just like that, I've got a nice little setup for iron plates. It's like being back at the very beginning of the game. Just 3 smelters, 3 constructors. Only difference is I'm fully overclocking the smelters and the iron plates. So in total, I'll be taking 225 iron ore and turning it into 150 iron plates. You know, not a ton, and you know, now that I say it out loud, let's just go ahead and sloop all of these. Because I have them, and this is temporary. I swear, it's temporary. So now let's upgrade all of these to Mark II, and this one to Mark IV. And let's watch this mini little thing come to life. Gotta love the simple setups. So this will definitely help, and what I'm gonna want to do is unclick this. So I want to use whatever is in my dimensional depot first, and then use what's in my inventory. And then I'll help make this last longer and primarily use the dimensional depot. So now I can just place another one. And now I'm gonna realize that concrete, even though it will eventually fill up, probably not going to fill up at quick enough of a rate for me. Well, it just so happens that right around here, hey look, there's a normal limestone node. And an even more simple setup. You only need constructors if you're using the default recipe. 450 limestone is going to go into 4 constructors that are completely overclocked and slooped. I still had enough, so I might as well. Again, it's just temporary. So in total, I'll be making 300 concrete. Since it stacks to 500, really isn't a ton. But I also have 4 dimensional depots over at my permanent concrete factory. Since they're at 240 per minute, right now my upload speed for concrete is 960 per minute. If we add the other 300, that's 1260. I guess that still means that I'm only going to be able to place one of these every 2 minutes, I guess. Which isn't great, but I also have a whole bunch of other work to do. Well, first up, let's just go ahead and turn this on, and I'm just going to take power from anywhere. Let's watch it come to life. And just like that, we've got 300 concrete per minute. So that'll definitely help. But I'm clearly going to need a ton of concrete because of the poor decisions I made while designing my blueprint. So I've got my personal train right there, and I'm going to go ahead and hop in. And if we take a look at the map, and because I know a few people have asked, so I'm sure a few more are curious, this is the cartograph mod. It doesn't affect the gameplay at all. Think of it as the Satisfactory calculator interactive map, just built in-game. So now I can actually see where all my buildings are, and if I go over to here, I can select and deselect all sorts of things. But it's really nice to be able to just see kind of where you have buildings, and especially my train lines. So part of me is real curious how long it's going to take for this train to go from here all the way over to my concrete factory. And then back. This 4-way intersection will eventually get expanded, and most likely I'll connect these lines, and that would probably be a bit closer. But that's way more work for something I don't really need right now. But I think it would be nice to know just kind of how far this round trip is. I'm going to hop in my train and head over to the Rocky Desert, because I think it's this one right here is my concrete factory. Since I need so much of it for this project, I think I'm just going to fill up a whole freight car. And with the whole freight car and the temporary production, I think it'll help speed up the towers by quite a bit. I've completed my round trip. I've now got a whole bunch of concrete and iron plates, and the freight car is still about half full. Since this has been working away for a while, we've built up some more too. It took about 15 minutes to get there, run out, grab a whole bunch of concrete, and then make it back. It was actually quicker than I thought it would be. But plenty enough time to build up a whole bunch. And this side is already full. Excellent. We'll just empty pretty much all of it. And I set up my trash can blueprint, so when I do have extra materials that I don't need, I can just toss them in here and get rid of them pretty quickly. Alright, so let's see if we can at least finish one full tower. Put it in blueprint auto connect. And the thing that I have learned painfully after placing a whole lot of these and then getting to the next step, the beam adds about a half a meter to each one of these blueprints. So to get these to actually line up the way that I need to hold control and then hit page down once. Each one of these blueprints have 4 of the fuel generators in it, and each tower is going to have 32. So I need 8 of these in total. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4. Halfway there. And 8. Not gonna lie, it's a tad bit taller than I thought it would be. But since I'm going vertical, just think about all the space I'm saving on the ground. Now, unfortunately, to place the rest of those, it pretty much did use up all of what I had left, so I can place a couple more. But basically, in between letting these containers refill to about halfway or so, I'm gonna start working on the logistics. So the bottom floor is going to be where everything kind of has to exit or leave. And I'm definitely going to need a few more floors to be able to deal with all of this. And so my thinking is I'm going to try to keep the very bottom floor as free as possible. And I'm going to do the load balancing up above it. And then kind of drop things down to where they need to go. I think that will work. So now I kind of need to line things up. So crude oil is going to go there. And then these two are going to get plugged in here and here. And then the other side will have those two. Nitrogen will come through the middle. And the water extractors are going to be placed on the side. I'm not going to have those come in here. So that way I don't have two pipes competing for the same corner. Because if I try to keep the same pattern and bring the water pipe in from here, there's going to be some crazy clipping. So we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to continue to work away at some of this busy stuff while my containers fill up, and then I can place another tower. Now the second tower is in place, and we've got a little pipe work done. Like I said, not really the cleanest since we're dealing with the 45-degree angle, but I tried. And what I've realized is I'm actually going to redo a little bit of this because I don't actually need the floor hole. What I wanted is just to get the height right. And now what I can do is I can still use horizontal to vertical and just have it go straight in. Because these are actually all just temporary. So what I'm doing is I'm just using temporary foundations to help me do all the load balancing. And since everything is stackable in 2 meters basically, like this right here, these pipes are 2 meters apart. Conveyor poles are the exact same. They're 2 meters. So I know that everything will stack real nicely if I do it all 2 meters. So that was 1, here's 2. So it doesn't look quite right because you're clipping just like straight through the middle of the pipe. But now what I can do is just delete this bottom layer because I don't need it anymore. And I am just going to get rid of some of these so it's just a little bit cleaner down here. And now I'm just going to kind of work my way up. I wanted oil first because it's the only fluid, and so I wanted to use the least amount of pumps. So the oil will come in here, it gets split in half, and then it'll get split in half again. So quarter there, and then same thing on this side. And now I've got options because I need to do the load balancing for the coal, the sulfur, and then the nitrogen. Nitrogen, I don't have to worry about head lift. Even if I did, it's coming from way up there, and so that wouldn't be an issue anyways. But this is essentially what I do to make it a little bit easier, is just lay down a bunch of temporary foundations, and it just becomes a whole lot easier to deal with. So let's just say we're going to load balance the sulfur next. That's 200 sulfur for each one of these, so I need a Mark III belt into here. And then from in here, I'm going to take a Mark III lift, and I'm just going to angle it in. And then I'm going to do that for all 4 of them. Then it's going to give me a good idea of where I should set up my splitters. Now for the nitrogen and the coal, they're both going to be coming in from this corner. The sulfur is going to be coming in from this corner. I'll have a radar tower out here not too long, but temporarily, let's just throw one down right here. And now we can see all the nodes in the area. I'm going to be using the closest coal node, and then as far as sulfur, I need 800. So I'm going to be using the normal and the impure. That way, hopefully I can just leave the pure one till later when I have the Mark VI belts, and then I can get the full 1200 out of that one. And I've also got nitrogen gas right up here. So now I can grab a whole bunch of iron plates and probably a whole bunch of concrete. Beautiful. Now I can start working on the third tower. And then while everything builds up again, I can start working on the next layer. And I've also got some belts and pipe highways to build. Thankfully, none of them have to be too long. And that's the third tower done. 3/4 of the way there. I placed the coal miner. So we've just got the real short route it needs to go. And into the factory. And it's going to share this short little section right here with the nitrogen pipes. For the power plant, I only need 600 nitrogen gas. So all of this could fit in one Mark II pipe. However, if I don't have to try to put 600 in a pipe, I'd rather not. So I'm just going to use 2. Each one's only going to have 300. I could use a Mark I pipe and there should be nothing wrong with it. But I also kind of like the look of the Mark II pipes. And this is the path that it is going to go. So we're going to have them climb up here. The usual debate of do I want it to go horizontal and then just drop vertically, or do I want to make a really long slope? I decided to go with this mainly because there's 3 more coal nodes back here. It's going to be a lot easier to do anything with them or get them out of here if I have it set up like this as opposed to a really long ramp. And then once we get to here, that should be easy to figure out how to get the pipe over onto the foundations. I find it's easiest to map out everything like this. And I can also lay all the pipe, although let's make this white because it is nitrogen. I'll lay all the pipe, and then it's easier to replace the foundations with some sort of support. So I'll probably use like concrete or something like this for this long stretch. And then when it's close to the ground, I'll just use these. But if it's too high up in the air, I feel like this blueprint just looks a little bit silly. This one's good when it's nice and short, but for something like that, I'm gonna need to come up with something a little different. Now I've got all 4 of the towers in. How cool is that? 128 fuel generators. I've been working on the nitrogen pipes, so like I said, down here I'm just going to use this blueprint because it's nice and easy, and now I can just delete these, kind of get them out of the way, and that's what it's going to look like. Right here, I'm going to finish filling these in. And this is what I used as kind of a support for the pillar. Since the pipe can't stretch all that distance in one go, I was going to need it to connect to something, so I decided to use some concrete pillars. So I used the smaller ones on the inside and then some bigger ones on the back of it. Normally, this one would be even with that, but if you do that, then you've got that weird Z-fighting, and there are ways to kind of fix this, but I thought a cooler look anyways would be if I locked it in place and then just nudged it down half a meter. So there is a tiny bit of Z-fighting right here if you look closely, but thankfully because these are both the carbon steel finish, once you get any distance away, it becomes much harder to see. So I just used the copper finish on the small concrete pillars and ran those all the way over. And now we're to here. And this is when I discovered something else new that's kind of quirky about the game. I've ran into this before, but I so rarely use these that it doesn't happen very much and I just always forget about it. The inner corner extension. Most of the time, I'm using a 4 meter, and as you'll see, it looks normal. But if I change it to the 1 meter, and we press H, that's where it snaps to. Yeah, kind of strange. And so that happens over here also. When I want to snap it over here, I actually have to snap it there, and then I nudge it 1.5 meters. And now it's in the right spot. I do actually remember having this issue before we had vertical nudging, and it made it so I just never used the different sizes because it was just so hard to work with. But at least now I can work around the quirkiness. Thankfully, the normal half meter foundations don't have that same issue, so these are really easy to place still. I've made a little bit more progress. We've got the nitrogen and the coal pretty much all taken care of. The power lines are ran, I think, most of the way out there. I do still need to power that on, put the little satellite node things on there, and connect the last bit of belt. And that came over here. Let me just delete these real quick so you can see. The load balancing for the nitrogen and the coal is also done. I promise it just looks way crazier than it is. So we've got the coal. It comes right into here, and then it gets split the first time. So half of it goes to this side, half of it goes to that side. And then we just split it in half again. So half of it comes over here, the other half goes to that side, and then we do a mirrored thing on this one. And then we have the nitrogen that comes up here. And I clearly got some of the heights wrong here. I think I was a meter off when I placed some of those foundations. So we're going to redo those pipes. But thankfully these are easy because it's just going to need to plug into this. Half of it goes here. The other half goes to that side, and then we do the same thing over here. 300 pipe gets split in half, so 150 and 150. Like I said, it just looks way more chaotic than it is. There's not actually a whole lot going on in here. It's just pipes and belts going everywhere, and if I got the height right, I think things would have looked a little bit more normal. But don't worry, I'll fix that. Because I thought I was done with that part. I laid the path for my 2 sulfur belts. So these will just follow these foundations. See here, this is where I'm getting my 800 sulfur. I've got my really basic load balancing set up. The normal node is clocked to 600, and the impure node is only clocked to 200. So the 200 line runs into a merger. The 600 gets split into thirds, so 200, 200. There's my 400, 200, and 200. Here's another 400. And now I just need to place the belts and go all the way out there. Since this right here is going to be kind of similar to that, I think I'm just going to copy it for this section anyways. Once I get closer to the ground, I'm going to come up with a new blueprint for having two belts next to each other. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, adding in the sulfur made it even more chaotic, but I think it's fun. Just like the nitrogen, it's coming in two pipes, just like the sulfur is coming in on two belts, so it just needs to get split in half once. So half of it goes here, half of it goes to that wall, and then the other belt does the same thing on this side. And then I decided to have the nitrogen come in on the very top. And because of the way the heights worked out, I ended up redoing this. This ended up getting pushed up 2 more meters, so I just added an extra layer of the small concrete pillars. And that way the sulfur could come in at this height, because I didn't really want the sulfur to come in even higher. On this side, since we needed to clear this belt, it didn't look bad being a little bit higher on this side in my opinion. So that's why I wanted to keep these ones just a little bit lower. And here's the new blueprint that I came up with. Just a single big concrete pillar surrounded by shelf beams with the beam connectors on top. And then I just nudged the wall outlet kind of into it so it's just barely showing. This way I can run 2 belts and carry the power with it. The curve mode makes doing this kind of a turn just so much more fun. And since these just feel a lot more robust, I decided to just use these as pillars instead of running it completely alongside. I did still go with this whenever I was going to use a lift so that it looked a little bit more uniform, but none of this felt quite as tall or as long as that part was, and so I thought that just having the pillars every once in a while felt good enough. That is the sulfur, nitrogen, and coal pretty much all taken care of. There's one last part I haven't done. It is complete the actual pipe worked all the way back to the extractor. I'm using that normal node right there. And what I would really like to do is use a nice long curve section from starting somewhere around here. The only problem is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Since I did the same thing I do with the miners and the housing on it is centered on the actual miner, the height is on the global grid, but the alignment isn't quite right, and so these don't line up perfectly. But using the curve mode is a great way to be able to bridge that gap. See, it's 6 foundations to here. If I were to do the same on this side, that would be all the way out here. And if I put it in curve mode, we're not anywhere close. That is kind of what I want to do. So I'm going to paint these just so they're different. And I'm going to erase this and this blueprint. And I'm going to use the rail. So we're going to go from here to here because this can stretch quite a bit farther. And get that lined up just right. Terrific. Curved pipe and this rail will follow the same path. And now what I can do is get myself right here in the corner of these foundations. And I can grab my pillar. And I can get this to snap right to the bottom. Probably somewhere around here. Looks good enough for me. Now what I'm going to do is grab the foundation. We snap it to the bottom. I can just nudge it up 4 meters and go ahead and place it. The railway has served its purpose and now I can delete it. I'm going to grab my pipe blueprint, snap it right there in the middle, lock it in place, and I'm going to nudge it down 4 meters and go ahead and place it. I also need to replace it right on the corner of this one like I was planning. And then the end one is going to go right here. Let's nudge that down. Now let's connect all the pipes. So from here to here. And now this should be right in the middle to be able to continue that curve. Looks good to me. And now we can get rid of all of these temporary foundations. And there we go. Thank you so much for the comment a few videos ago that suggested this, because it really does come in handy for these really long curves and being able to add in a middle point right where you need it. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's much better than anything I would have been able to come up with. So thank you again. Now I've got pipe all the way from the oil extractor into the factory. Still got this mess that I've got to hide, but we'll get to that not too long. There's one last piece to this puzzle before I get to all the decorating. I've dealt with all of the inputs except for the water. The outputs will be pretty easy. I'm just going to end up merging them together and sending them into a sink for right now. We're making really good progress on the power plant part of the factory, but that's not everything I'm building today. But that's getting ahead of myself. Let's finish this. Let's deal with the water. So we're going to go with the half foundation. I'm going to spin it so the grippy metal part thing is facing out. And we're going to go all the way around each of the towers at the bottom with one of these. And in each of the corners, we're going to close it off with the outer corner extension. Nice little rounded corner. Go ahead and make our pipes blue. And then for this, I'm going to go ahead and use clean Mark 1 pipes. And let's put it in straight mode. And it's going to get placed right there. And for the last part, what I'm going to do is lock this in place. And now I'm going to nudge it down 1, 2, 3, 4 meters. It is just barely above the floor right there. But I just need to place down a few temporary foundations here. So that when I grab the water extractor, normally it has completely free placement, right? But once you have foundations underneath it, now it starts snapping in 1 meter increments like most other things. So now I just want to get this lined up and give myself just enough space, but not too much. Let's try that. Whenever there's a height difference to deal with, I usually go with the auto 2D. It'll take most of the curve out of it and just be as straight as possible usually. And we'll make sure this is blue. And each one of these needs to be clocked to 200. And now all 4 water extractors are in place. So one of the great things about laying it all like this and breaking it down into 4 towers, if this is still way more power than you think you would need, you could break it down even smaller. 75 crude oil with 100 coal, 200 sulfur, 150 nitrogen gas, and 200 water will produce 50 polymer resin and 50 compacted coal, and will produce 300 rocket fuel per minute. And if you burn that in the fuel power generators, that's enough for 18,000 megawatts for every 75 crude oil and a bunch of other stuff. Not too shabby. Now I've got my work cut out for me to try to make this not look horrible. I'm gonna hide most of this. I'm gonna add a door to one of these sides so that I can still get in here, because I obviously want to still have access instead of just deleting floors. But this is not gonna be visible. And I knew that's what my plan was, and that's why the doors are placed so high. The first major reason is it's at the same height as the refinery right here, so I can actually come in here and not just run straight into a machine. And then from here, we've got this little walkway, and I can control the valve, so when it comes time to turn it on, I just open it up completely. Or I could even delete it if I just don't want to have the valve in here anymore. But now what I can do is just zoop these out. So this right here is probably just going to be the main level. So I ended up having plenty of space. And I'm sure the intro or thumbnail probably already gave it away. But yeah, I'm just going to throw an elevator up through the middle, because all of these floors are facing inwards, so why wouldn't I have an elevator right up the middle? It just makes sense. The save is currently at 196 hours and 4 minutes. Let me get to work on the decorating, and we'll see how long it took me when we get back. Welcome back to my new rocket fuel power plant, where I'm turning 300 crude oil into 72,000 megawatts. Let's take a little tour. Like usual, I'm going to start with the farthest parts and work my way back in. With the sulfur, not too much has changed over here. Just cleaned up some of the belt highway a little bit. Even after doing all of that work with the inner corner extension pieces, I decided to just delete it all. For the next factory I'm going to do after the power plant, I am going to need more nitrogen, but I only need one of the normal nodes. If I end up needing the other 3 and I need to group them together like I normally do, I may build something on top of it. But for now it just seemed pointless because it was easier just to use either the curve or the straight mode here and get them onto my little pipe highway. Over here at the train station, which still needs a little bit more decorating, but I promise I'm going to get to it eventually. Next to my train, I decided to add some spots for some hypertubes. I don't think I'll actually need this many hypertubes, but once I kind of figured out the spacing, I just got carried away and added enough spaces for a bunch of them. go ahead and jump in and see where it takes us. And here's the entrance. It feels kind of weird because there's no storage or, main sinks that I'm going to have to build this around. It's pretty much just, well, here's an elevator to take you to every floor. Now let's take a tour of the actual factory. So down here I decided to keep most of it as the steel walls, but then the spacing for everything, of course, just ended up getting weird. It all started with the oil, because I needed the initial pipe to come in above where these ones were, so then I could split it up and then they would drop below and go to the right place. So that meant this one was at 6 meters, and then the next thing balanced 2 meters above that, and then the next one 2 meters above that. So I ended up with kind of some weird spacing. So there's 3 walls of that and then 3 walls of this. So 6 total. So I decided to just split that up and do 3 one color and then 3 the other. And then to kind of split the gap, use a whole bunch of signs. Where the inputs came in ended up being a little tricky. So what I did was basically just cut out like a corner. So if I was going to recreate this, I cut out the 2 panels. And then I took the inverted up corner ramp and I placed that right in the corner. So I can replace that pipe, it's fine. And then I've got the up corner ramp for the other side. So now I've got a nice flat section on both of these. For the wall in the back, it's pretty easy to place using the good old road barriers. Now to place the actual walls, you're going to place it right there in the corner and then I just click it. And now what I can do is I can align a wall with the road barrier, but what you actually want to do is hold control and you can replace the road barrier with the wall. So holding control, now I'm going to press H and that's going to lock that in place. And now I can nudge it over into just the right place that I want and place it down. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. They're going to clip into each other a little bit. That's how I get that back wall. But before you do that, what I want to do is place a road barrier right in the very center and place a wall here. And now I can place my 2 wall holes exactly in the very center because now you see they line up. Because once I place the walls here and here, it becomes much harder to get them in quite the right spot. Like now I can't get this to line up right next to that one like I would have been when it was just one wall in the center. Getting the conveyor wall holes or the pipeline wall holes in the right spot first, and then placing the final walls is the order you want to do things in. And so that's what I did for all of the corners. Now we just need to put this back in horizontal vertical and replace my walls. Like it never happened. And then I did the same thing over here. This one just has 2 pipes and the belt, but same concept. From up on the elevator floor, I can get all the way down. So if we take stairs, we can get down into the chaos. And it does just look so cool from down here. Maybe I should add a little bit more railing, but just don't fall in. And then from up here, we can get to any of the refinery floors and then easily be able to hop down here, get to the valve. And since the refineries have stairs on here, you can get back up here. This whole space was fairly cramped. That was basically the best thing I could come up with, I thought. Because from here, you could just use the refinery ladder and get all the way down to the ground floor if you really wanted to. Or, the jetpack. And then we've got the elevator. So we've got the elevator, and then I used the small concrete pillars, painted the very dark black. I have it saved as just a preset, but if you change this to -10, you can get a very, very dark black. And it'll give you a really nice dark black for the coated concrete as well. And then we can come in here. We've got the rocket fuel production floor that we're on, and then just a whole bunch of different floors of power. And you'll notice it only goes up to the 5th floor. So let's go ahead and go up to there.
Receiving Fix-It elevator announcement. Bring your turtle to work day has been cancelled indefinitely due to yesterday's incident. In other news, we're still searching for the missing Pomeranian.
What? I've never got that message before. Ah, beautiful ride. So we pop out right here, and we still have a few more floors to go. So if we just hang right, we come up to the second elevator. So unfortunately, this is taller than what one elevator can take you. So I've got my transition floor, and then you've got 6, 7, and 8 above here. But that's alright, still made it work. So this part. This is not exactly how I plan things. It still works. You can easily run over the beam, thankfully. And thankfully, because of that, I didn't have to spend hours reworking everything because it still works well enough. But I want to share the mistake I made so that hopefully it'll save you guys a little bit of headache in the future. So for that, let's come down here towards the bottom. So going from this blueprint, which I did change all of the walls from concrete to steel, and so now those aren't part of the blueprint, but all the machines still are. So going from this blueprint to this blueprint, there was no issue. And that's because neither of these blueprints included that beam. That's something that I just added. Unfortunately, because this blueprint has this beam right here, this is what threw things off by just a little bit. So like I mentioned, I needed to nudge things down by 0.5 meter, and you can see that it's ever so slightly clipping down into this blueprint. And that worked for the most part. The only issue is when you delete this beam and you get nice and close, there's still a tiny little gap here. So now, if I were to delete this right here, this is nice and flush and even, just how it should be. If we come up to the next one and delete this one, it's ever so slightly raised, but not really a big deal. We go up to the next one, it's just a tiny bit bigger, but you can hardly tell. But once we get up to the very top, yeah, it's a pretty big gap. So if you add enough floors, they definitely add up. And it still works, but I really didn't like the fact that you could see straight through it. So that's why I ended up adding all of these beams to kind of cover it up. And thankfully, even when I'm not in fly mode, I can still easily run up and over these things. I mean, even if it wasn't there, it would still work. I just really didn't like being able to see through that. And so that's why I added all of these beams. But it also gave me a chance to make each one of these floors just look a little bit thicker and kind of add some label signs, and I think it ended up turning out pretty well. But if you're going to make a tower like this, my recommendation is don't add the beams on the very top or the bottom, because it does kind of screw with the spacing just a little bit. Thankfully, the only thing that was affected were these catwalks. And now this area has a permanent radar tower. I went through and added all of my fans. I think if I had the fans on all 4 sides, it might have been a little bit too much. But I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. For right now, all of the polymer resin and compacted coal are going to come along this belt and head on into this sink. I'm not really sure if I'm going to use this space over here or if I would rather use the space on the other side and try to fit it in somewhere on this side so that it's closer to the train station. But after we get this powered on, I'm going to start working on a place to deal with a lot of that compacted coal. So on the inside of here, I thought it would just be easier to group everything together, so everything's just getting merged up all onto one belt. I probably could have done that inside of each one of these blueprints and just had one belt headed over, but I kind of like the look of the 4 belts and everything has its own item on there. So it's just a little bit foggy here in the blue crater, isn't it? Well, that's pretty much it for the tour. So the next step is going to be turning it on. So I just have one pump for the oil. To be honest, I may not even need it, but it just feels better to have one. I'm making a lot of power here. I don't really think I have to worry about using one extra pump. As far as the startup process goes, I just need to connect one cable here and that'll power on the oil extractor. I'm going to go into the factory because it is going to take a minute or two for the crude oil to kind of fill up the pipe. And the way that usually works is it needs to fill up most of the pipe before it starts sending it up. It is going to take a couple of minutes for it to start showing up in the refineries. Once it starts showing up there, I'll go over to the sulfur and then the coal and get those sent into the factory. And then we'll watch the bottom part come to life for a little bit. Even once it's up to 100%, each one of those blenders is only making 300. And I'm going to wait until the industrial fluid container is completely full, which is 2400. So once everything's running, I've still got 8 minutes. But really, small price to pay just to have the startup be a whole lot smoother in my opinion. Once everything's backed up, we'll open up the valves And then we'll see how long it takes for all the fuel generators to come to life. It's time for some more power. Here we go. Alright, now I'm just waiting for everything else to back up. So once this has completely full, there we go. Shouldn't take too long. I'm just going to let everything all the way back to the oil extractor back up. There we go. Now I just need to come to each valve, tower by tower, and release the valve. Ah, I gotta love that sound. Oh, that's beautiful right there. Well, yeah, that's bound to happen. It is still technically a manifold system, which I thought, because of the way that I set up the pipes, we're gonna see this should get up to 600. Well, it should. And these are basically already full, so we're getting the rest of it to head on. Let's go to the next floor. So on this floor, we've got 156, 156, 161. Close enough. I thought that it would actually prioritize the two side and then send the rest up the middle. Just goes to show, I don't know as much as I think I do sometimes. Here on the third floor, we're almost all the way full. I came all the way up to the 8th floor. Let's see how long it takes to get these to stay on at 100%. There we go. We are now up to 111,600 megawatts. My power boost alone is almost as much as my turbo fuel plant. Those alien augmenters are amazing. So you can see that was the last dip. This was the first tower to turn on, so that's why it took a little bit longer for the other ones to finally level out. But as you can see, we're just going to really slowly climb until it completely fills up. That is going to take quite a while. But the nice thing about starting it up with the industrial storage buffer is that I made sure that it has more than enough to be able to reliably start and then just keep running and still even have a buffer once everything's completely full. Normally how I do power plants is I just have huge rows of all of the fuel generators. I let all the pipes completely fill up because the fuel power generators can intake their input, but they won't actually use it until they have a power connection. Even if it goes to nothing, it just needs a cable connected to that power output and it is going. It was a great way to make sure that everything was pre-filled and it would just run and everything would have a buffer kind of built in. Having 4 towers and 8 floors meant that I really didn't want to have to fly around and do all of those power connections manually. It was not going to be nearly as easy as when they're just in huge rows. So really happy with the way that this system worked out. We come down here at the bottom, we still have about half. This is the one thing I don't really understand about pipes and all of this, basically. There's plenty in this buffer. Why won't it drain and completely fill all of the pipes? Because I'm pretty sure if we check, yeah, like this pipe isn't even completely full. I guess this is probably the same percentage full as this container, and in some weird way that all makes sense, maybe? I'm sure somebody that better understands pipes will be able to tell me in the comments, and thank you for that, by the way. I was really hoping that this would basically just empty and just completely fill everything. I feel like since gas doesn't need a pump may hurt things if I add it. I may try adding a pump just to see if I can get the rest of the pipe just to completely fill, because I would prefer all of this just to be full, because I have the extra fuel laying around. I'd just like everything to be full so that I can make sure that it all runs smooth. But as long as I'm getting a nice steady flat power graph, I guess I really don't have anything to complain about. I've got plenty of time to keep my eye on this because I'm not done out here. Obviously, the video's not over yet. There's 200 polymer resin and 200 compacted coal on this belt. The resin is going to continue to get sunk, but I have a plan for that compacted coal. I've let the power plant run for a little while, and everything is staying on at 100%. The polymer resin and compacted coal are coming out to 400, just what it's supposed to be. But before I move on to the next step and we deal with a lot of this compacted coal, I wanted to go over a couple of things that I experimented with. If we take a look at the buffer on the inside, we've got a pretty consistent buffer, a consistent 301 drain rate, and the fill rate just goes back and forth because of the cycle time of the blender. On some level, it's still really weird to me, but I think basically since this is half full, we come over to this pipe, it's about half full. If we come up to the very top floor and we look at any of the pipes, it's not anywhere close to being halfway full. But if we look at any one of these machines, they've got plenty of fuel and it's actually still slowly climbing. The setup definitely works. Normally, I just really like to have all of the fuel pipes just completely full. I did try a couple different things. The first one I thought is maybe if I replace the valve, then I could basically kind of pull whatever extra is out of here and fill up the pipes. In my head it makes sense, but that's not how the game works, and it didn't do anything at all. So another option I could go with would be just to turn off a couple of the machines, especially down here on the lower levels. And now I'd be creating more fuel than I'm consuming, and eventually the system would just kind of fill up. But I would need to back up the entire system, so not just these pipes need to fill up, it would take filling up the entire industrial storage container for that to work. Let's make sure we turn these back on before I forget. If that was the goal, I wanted to just fill up all of the pipes and the storage container just so I completely had a full buffer again. I think the easiest way to go about it, even though I only have 10, that means I could basically do it on two sides. The only problem is now my system really isn't built to handle the compacted coal. So either I'm going to have to manually clear out the extra here, or I'd have to upgrade a whole bunch of pipes. But that would be an easy way to fill up the whole system with more fuel. But since the production is rock steady right now, I think I'm just going to leave it how it is. I'm going to be out here for quite a while working on the next project. So from time to time, I'll just make sure to look at this power graph and make sure that everything is just staying exactly how it should be. Bonus power every once in a while is okay. I just don't want it to ever drop below this number. So I'll make sure to keep an eye on that. But now it's time to deal with that compacted coal. Originally, I was thinking this area right here would be a good spot for the factory. I don't need a ton of machines, but I do need a little bit more oil, the compacted coal, and some more water. But this is going to be making packaged rocket fuel. And the only way to package it is with aluminum. So I'm going to need the train. I'm thinking this side of the factory would be a little bit more convenient. I'll be able to get the aluminum from the train much easier, and if I ever want to use the rocket fuel for something else, it'll be much easier to put that on the train. So let me get some foundations laid and then we'll go over the plan. I now have a really rough outline. I'm not really sure if this is enough space. I'm leaning towards probably not, just because I don't feel like cramming things super close together. I like giving the machines a little bit of space if I can. But I do want to work around all of whatever this is here in the middle. And even though I'm probably not going to use the geyser over here on the left, I would like to leave it available just in case. And here is the plan. Out of the 200 compacted coal coming from the power plant, I am going to split off 144 of it and turn it into packaged rocket fuel. And the reason for that number is it just gave me nice even numbers for everything else. If I tried to use the full 200, I was just going to have some crazy numbers and decimal points to work with, and I just didn't want to deal with that. This is going to create way more than I'm going to need. Instead of using the nitro rocket fuel alternate recipe, this is using the default, which is, I guess, still technically an alternate recipe. But using turbo fuel and nitric acid, I can create rocket fuel. And then this will still create a little bit more compacted coal that I'll group up with the other bit, and it's going to go into a sink with the polymer resin. Even though there's more steps, this is still a fairly easy factory to build. To make the rocket fuel, I need turbo fuel and nitric acid. To make the fuel, I'm going to use the same method as before, where I make heavy oil residue and then use the diluted fuel recipe in a blender. For nitric acid, it's just nitrogen gas, water, and a couple iron plates. And then to be able to package it, like I said, I need some aluminum ingots so I can turn those into empty fluid tanks. I'm going to be making 300 rocket fuel, but when you package it, it gets compressed. So this is actually only going to make 150 packaged rocket fuel per minute. Alright, so let's at least get the rough outline of what's going on here. Probably going to have to mess with the spacing a little bit. Here's my thinking. I'm going to have the compacted coal somehow come over here. And then this spot right here isn't going to have any machines. This is just where I'll do my load balancing. Since it's coming on a sushi belt, I'm also going to have to split off the polymer resin. And if I end up being able to do it in a much more compact space, I can start it up a little bit higher and just delete some of this. As far as machine goes, we're going to start with a refinery. These two will be purple because they will be making my heavy oil residue. Unlike the other ones, these are not fully overclocked. Only 2 machines, so 54 for each one. And then from here, I'm going to place 2 blenders. The one on the right is going to be doing fuel. And the one on the left will be doing the nitric acid. With the fuel, go ahead and set that recipe. I need 216 per minute. Oddly enough, I can unlock rocket fuel. So here's the funny thing with this alternate recipe. We go to nitric acid and opening codex. I actually don't have a way of making it yet. Oops. Guess I'm going to have to make a little detour back to the hub at some point, but I can put that off for a little bit longer. Let's place all the rest of the machines first. From here, I need 4 more refineries. And this is where I feel like spacing them out just because I should be able to. The spacing may work out a little bit different, we'll see. But these 4 are all going to be making the standard turbo fuel recipe. I'll be making 180 per minute across 4 machines, so 45 for each one. Just need a little bit more space because the last step here is 2 more blenders. These ones will both be making the rocket fuel, and they'll both be at 150%, making 150. I was wrong, that wasn't the last step. The last step is actually the packager here, which will be packaging my rocket fuel. Since it defaults to 60, we can completely overclock this and just have one packager take in 300 and give me 150 packaged rocket fuel. But this needs an input of the empty fluid tanks. So for that, I'm just going to have a constructor right next to it. And it is going to be making empty fluid tanks, and thankfully it's at the exact same rate. So fully overclocked, it'll also be 150. Besides this, I just need 1 water extractor. And that's the reason why these 2 blenders are right next to each other, because this pipe actually needs to skip these 4 refineries. It's going to those 2 blenders. But these 2 are the only things that need water, so it would be much easier if they can just share a water pipe right here. All of the pipe work is going to be really easy because, well, yeah, I didn't quite line these up right. This right here, I want to line up with this outside one so that I can just do this. Good old straight mode. And then these 2 can share the water pipe, but I want that to line up a little bit differently. So I'm just going to have to realign these a little bit, but that's going to be the heavy oil residue. I'll be making a little bit more polymer resin, so again, that's just going to get grouped up with the other resin, and then it's going to get sunk. Since there's only 4 refineries for the turbo fuel, doing both the belt and the pipe work should be nice, clean, and simple. And then from the turbo fuel to the rocket fuel, the way I wanted to do this, since there's 4 of these and 2 of these, I don't need to group up all of the turbo fuel together. I can just group up 2 sets. So these will group together and go to 1. And then I'll do the same thing on this side, except for get that obviously lined up. And then I just need the nitric acid to come over here and split in between these 2. This factory should be pretty straightforward to put together. I do have a couple things I need to take care of first though. Namely, get all the recipes. So nitric acid is a big piece that I don't have unlocked yet. I'm going to go ahead and hop in my train and head back to the hub so I can look at that milestone. Home sweet home. Let's see what it takes. Not in drone ports, obviously. I'm actually a little surprised it wasn't in this one, but I guess we're in particle enrichment. That's where that sweet nitric acid is. Produced when nitrogen gas reacts with water. Its high corrosiveness and oxidizing properties make it an excellent choice for refinement and fuel production processes. Just what I was looking for. Actually don't think I've ever seen packaged nitric acid. Kind of a cool container. Alright, so let's select that one so that we have it in here. And oh boy, I don't have those. Well, I definitely have the quick wire, and I should have the fused modular frames, but turbo motors and the cooling systems definitely don't have that many. While I'm here, this unlocked a whole bunch of alternate recipes, so might as well get that started. It's that time again for another temporary setup. I would have set this all up at the hub, but I needed nitrogen gas. And since there's plenty of extra wells over here, it just made sense. Plus, while this works away, I can continue to work on my new factory. I've got a small storage container of copper sheets, aluminum sheets, heading into an assembler that's fully overclocked and sloop, making my heat sinks. Those head on over into the blender, which is making cooling systems. These just need heat sinks, motors, and nitrogen gas. Heat sinks aren't something that I ever really need to make and have in my dimensional depot because they're just an intermediate product, kind of like stators. There's nothing I can build with my build gun that needs these. It's a good thing I'm making all that extra power, isn't it? So this will work away and crank out a few hundred cooling systems. Once I have the cooling systems, then I should have enough radio control units. I definitely have enough motors and rubber. And I'll be able to create enough turbo motors to finish this milestone and still have enough extra to make a few more Mark III miners. Enough to where I can finally automate those. But that's for the next video. Alright, so temporary setup 1 complete. Let's get back to working on the factory. I messed around with the spacing a little bit more, so I think this is probably where everything is going to be. And then here we have the final product coming out of the packager. That's going to go into the smart splitter. Once the dimensional depot and my storage container fill up, it's going to head on into the sink to make sure everything can continue to flow. And just like that, we've got the basic pipe and belt work done. I ended up needing to scooch that refinery over just a little bit so that I could squeeze in this water extractor. And just barely fits in here, but hey, no clipping, and I should be able to still build something around this without clipping into whatever that is. So we've got the water feeding into both the nitric acid and the fuel. We've got the fuel line set up and the belt work for the compacted coal. Just need to plug in 144 compacted coal into that splitter in the middle. The nitric acid is going right along here, and then we've just got to go up and over that pipe, and then that feeds the 2 blenders. The excess compacted coal that's coming out of these blenders is just getting merged together, heads over here, and then into the sink. Like I said, pretty straightforward. And if I take a look at my dimensional depot, I'm completely full on cooling systems. So that is a good sign. So I switched it over to the turbo motors. But an even more simple setup, I just need a bunch of storage containers going into a manufacturer. And these have been cranking out 9.375 turbo motors per minute. Since I don't have the radio control units completely automated, or these, I'm not making a ton. I think I'm making like 100 in total. But that's enough for the milestone and to make a bunch of Mark III miners. My goal is to always do this basically as little as possible. But sometimes, you gotta do what you gotta do. While my turbo motors are being made, let's take care of the one crazy ratio split I have to do in this video. This belt is going to be coming from the center little hub. I'm going to be redirecting the compacted coal and the polymer resin. They're both on a sushi belt. So that's going to come along here and head into this smart splitter. I have it set up so that the polymer resin is going to the left and compacted coal is going to go straight. To make sure nothing gets backed up, I'm going to use a Mark IV belt. Since this belt's a Mark IV belt, That way when it hits the splitter, it can split easily and nothing will have to start backing up because, you know, there's multiple resin and this belt is slower or something like that. In the end, I don't think it would make any difference, but this should make everything flow a little bit smoother. So there I have 200 polymer resin, and right here I'll have 200 compacted coal. And this is where we start the ratio split. So we're gonna take 200 and go into a merger, and using my diagram here, I'm gonna go ahead and line everything up. So it goes a merger, 2 splitters, and then we switch back to a merger, and 2 more splitters. And this is where things are gonna change ever so slightly from the diagram. This made it the easiest way to lay out on the diagram, but in practice, I wanted to do it just ever so slightly different. Instead of this merger being up over here, this merger is actually going to be over here on this side. And then this merger is still going to be right over here. And I think that should be just about everything. So now let's go through the belts. I'll have 200 coming through here, but I'm going to use Mark IV just so nothing gets clogged up with the smart splitter here. 200 going into the merger. From 200, we're basically doing a 5-way split, which brings us down to 40. And then doing another 5-way split, which will give us 8 on each one. So this is the start of a 5-way split. So 200 is then going to end up being 240. So in this one, we're going to split in half. So there's 120, and the other 120 is going to get plugged in here. With this 120, we're going to split it 3 ways, and then we'll have 40 on each one. So the first one, we'll make sure we loop back. So there's 40. The next 40 is going to go on to another 5-way split. And then this 40 is going into the sink. So it needs to get grouped up with everything else. And so for that, we're just going to make a short little lift. So I'm going to go ahead and place that there, erase the splitter. And then that's going to get grouped up with everything else that's going into the sink. So on this side, I just need a little guy. And to make sure everything's connected, it's best to have the belt already placed. Get that to snap in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete the belt and the pole and replace them because I like the look of it going into the actual lift instead of ending right at the lip. Alright, so that's the first 5-way split. Now we've got 40 going into this merger. Let's just do another 5-way split. You add 20%, so this will be 48. This one needs to get split in half. So here's 24 plus my 120. Here's my 144 that's going to get plugged in right over there. The other 24 is going into this splitter. So there's 8, there's 8, and then the very last one needs to get looped back to this merger. So for that, we're just going to do a little stubby again. I'm going to place one last merger here. So this is 56. And it is going to meet up with the 200 polymer resin. And then from here, that's going to make its way over to the sink as well. Because all of that is just extra. And I could do something with it in the future. Chances are it's just going to end up going to a sink. It's a few extra points for me, and it ensures that everything in here just continues to run. Now that I've got most of this stuff out of the way, let's go check on my turbo motors. I've got 111 in my dimensional depot. That means that this has served its purpose. We can get all of these materials back now. Home sweet home. Again. This time, I actually have all the things I need. Let's load it up.
Milestone reached. Project part number 9, nuclear pasta, can be created in the particle accelerator. The accelerator has vast and fluctuating power demands, depending on the recipe, so will need careful integration with your factory. Fix-It does not waste, so nuclear waste can be refined by the particle accelerator into plutonium for reuse in the nuclear power plant. Fun fact: Fix-It psychologists suggest factory designs reflect the minds of their creators in unexpected ways. On an unrelated note, your infrastructural choices have been interesting.
Interesting isn't necessarily a bad thing, right, Ada? Well, I definitely have a bunch more alternates, so we're gonna keep on scanning. And now if I scroll all the way down to the bottom with parts, I should have my nitric acid. There we go. Just a little nitrogen gas, some water, and just a couple iron plates. Back in the blue crater, and I've made a couple updates. Originally, the compacted coal and the polymer resin were going into a sink, and that was right over there, but that has now been deleted, and I have rerouted it inside to now exit on this end. And it comes around here, goes on a little loop, and then I just added another smart splitter so that when I need to, I can just delete this and it'll just send it into the system. But for now, it's just set at any, none, and none. That way I don't accidentally clog up my system because none of the machines are on yet. Couple more changes and some interesting decisions that I hope won't bite me in the long run, but we'll see. The first one you may notice is this random lift that wasn't here before. And that's because I added iron plates to my smart splitter. Because what could go wrong with using all three outputs like this? So the iron plates, as you can guess, are going to end up on this sushi belt. And then those plates are going to go along here. You're going to go on a little journey. You're going to go outside the factory and then back in the factory. And then head into the blender. Because the blender is making my nitric acid. And this is just clocked to 100%. So I only need 10 iron plates. Currently, there's 200 polymer resin, 200 compacted coal, and I'm just going to add 10 iron plates. There's still plenty of room on the belt, so this should work. I also did the nitrogen gas, and it is going to go on this little highway. Go underneath this one, head up here. A little curve. And then this is where it's getting grouped up with the rest of them. And it's the reason why I went with the Mark II pipe, is just so it looked the same as the other two pipes. And because I only need 120 nitrogen gas, I was able to just use one of the normal nodes. So that still leaves me one normal and two pure nodes. Now I'm back to those iron plates. I said they were going to get added to this sushi belt. So how is that going to happen? Well, they are going to come from just on the other side. I figure I am probably not going to use this node for anything else. When you look at the map, this node is just not really near anything else. So I think I'm just going to just tear all of this up right here, and we're going to turn this into a little tiny version of it so that it can supply my nitric acid with the iron plates it needs. There's going to be a whole lot of the node that is unused because this is a pure node, and I need a total of 15 iron ore. All I need is one miner, one smelter, one constructor. This is going to be a pretty easy setup. So let me skip ahead and show you what it looks like. And we're back. Before we get this turned on, I was doing a little thinking. Sushi belts are great, but there's obviously some downsides. If one thing starts to back up, you basically clog up the entire belt and nothing's going to move. And for any factory, that's a problem. That becomes a gigantic problem when getting rid of the waste is going to power a huge portion of your world. So I need this to not ever clog up. To deal with that, I just added one more smart splitter. So this one originally was the very first one where I've got my split of three things. And this right here is kind of the fail point, right? If any one of those back up to the smart splitter, then everything beyond it is going to stop. So right before that, I have a smart splitter set for any and then overflow. So if for some reason that did happen, we've got the overflow. That just goes into the merger, and this goes on the same path that it would have gone normally. All the way over here, basically a crazy journey through the factory, all the way to the sink. Almost everything is coming from this area, so I should be able to make sure that everything works and that never really becomes an issue. But because the aluminum is coming by train, there is that ever so slight chance that things could go wrong. And if I don't get the aluminum ingots, then the rocket fuel doesn't get packaged, and then it can't get sunk, and then everything else backs up. Adding that one extra smart splitter to make sure that everything keeps running, mainly the bulk of my power just keeps getting produced, gives me a whole lot of peace of mind. Because if for some reason the packaged rocket fuel stops being made, it's really not a huge loss. It's only going to be for my jetpack right now. The power plant's a big deal though. And here's my little 10 iron plate per minute factory. I try to keep it really small and compact, nice and out of the way. Obviously the miner is quite a bit taller than the other machines. It gets its own little second floor of windows there. So let's head on in. Like I said, one miner, one smelter, one constructor. Not very fancy. If you put a Mark III miner on here, it's going to be clocked to a whopping 3.125%, which means at least the power consumption is going to be almost nothing. The iron ingots are underclocked to 50% because it's going to take 15 iron ingots to produce 10 iron plates. And then that heads on out. It's just got a really short belt to go on. And then it goes into this factory. And it just snakes right through here. And there just happened to be an open spot right here. And so then that comes through the middle. Right on through everything else. And just happened to line up perfectly with the last open spot on this merger to combine with all of the polymer resin and the compacted coal. And then that goes through here. And then it heads on over to the factory. This should come to life pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and get it turned on now. And iron plates per minute. 0.5 megawatts. Perfect. There they go. So these will just take a few minutes to finally end up at the sink, but I've got plenty of work to do in the meantime. Forgot to show it off, but I already took care of the oil pipe. So that's just going to basically hug along the side of the building until we get out to here. And then we're just going to go under the other pipe. And all I need is the one impure node that's out here. I only need 81 crude oil, so it's a good use for the impure node. So the last piece of this puzzle is the aluminum. With the factory being so close to the train station, I just need to create a belt that's going to go up to here. And because of the numbers we're dealing with, this is all going to be really easy. Back at the aluminum factory. Let me show you what I've done. The train that goes here is the one that runs in between the aluminum and the blue crater. Currently, it's just bringing the petroleum coke up here to make all of the aluminum ingots. And now it's going to take 150 of those aluminum ingots back down to the blue crater. And so for that, let's drop downstairs. Because this is built right on top of, well, apparently a bean. Every time bean. What I was going to say is it's built on top of all of this nitrogen. I wanted to try to give myself as much floor space as possible, so I built this on top of frame foundation so that hopefully it would be a little bit more out of the way, and I could always delete these and work around it a little bit easier if I needed to use those nitrogen nodes. The 150 aluminum ingots is just coming along here, and again I just wanted to leave more of the space available, so I ran it on the ceiling. I have 3 incoming belts of aluminum, 2 600s and the 540. So there's part of me that says I should have just used the 540 because that was already partially used. But taking 150 out of 600 is just so easy that I couldn't pass it up. 600 goes into a splitter, gets split in half. So 300, 300, that gets split in half. Here's my 150 that goes onto the train. Everything else gets merged up again. And I continue to sink the 450. I still have plenty aluminum ingots to play with. Let's head back down to the blue crater. And here's the train station on this side. The 150 aluminum ingots is just being sent right downstairs. And if we head down there, right into a storage bin. Now there are so many different ways I could have gone about this, because I do love my ratio splits. My first thought to get 150 would be if we take 270 and you divide it by 9, you've got 30. So this would be 5/9. I would need 2 splitters, 2 mergers. Pretty easy. But then I was thinking, can I do this as simply as possible? Because if you take 270 and you divide that in half, that's 135. So it's going to try to put 135 on both belts. But if I make this one a Mark II, only 120 fit. And because the splitters and mergers kind of have that internal storage, it should just keep trying to place one anytime there's a free spot on this belt, is the way I think it works. And whether that is how it works or not, it did give me the results I wanted. So my 270 minus the 120 belt, 150. And this is just a normal splitter. I didn't even need to use the smart splitter. Sometimes simple solutions are the best ones. Right now, those are just going into a sink to make sure that everything is working fine. But when it comes time to start packaging the rocket fuel, I can just delete all of this and it'll send the aluminum ingots on into the factory. So those exit right on the outside here. And then, like I said, just real simple little bus here. Gonna drop it down. Let's delete that one. Once it enters the factory, just needs to make its way over to the constructor. And I think that is all of the pieces to the puzzle. Now it's time to dress it up and make it look nice. Because I'm gonna need to jump ahead by, a couple hours. The save is currently at 206 hours. We're back. And now we're at 209 hours. I'm not the quickest at decorating, that's for sure. Almost everything I do, I end up changing my mind at least once about deleting it and redoing it. But it wasn't just this factory. I did a little bit of work on the train station too. I was tired of it just being a flat platform. So let's go on that tour. Because I already had the Hyper tube, I decided to just add 2 branches in here. Coming from the train station, you can branch off and head over to the package rocket fuel. And then from here, you could take either one of those entrances, and that one would take you over to the main power plant. Or this one, you could come back, and it'll take you to the train station. The 3-way intersection is nice, but it really doesn't work as well if you want to add it on to an existing straight line. Or at least, I haven't found a way to make it look good. I went with glass foundations here in the front because, well, I like seeing all the load balancing. Got our rocket fuel sign. I got lucky and I had just enough space to put it in there. And using 2 gates placed in opposite directions, you can get those fun little doors like this. And so now we come in here and it's just got a window here, but once you come inside, it's only got real simple walkways. I decided to use the rounded concrete pillar things, and that's because I used the inner corner extension and I just could not find something that would match the curve well. And so I tried to place these in spots where it kind of makes sense, but there's just not a lot. I really wish we had some curved walls that match that same curve, but they're just so thick, so I couldn't use that because it was going to clip into the machine. And yeah, I just wish we had a couple more aesthetic options. But hey, it's only 1.1. I'm sure we'll get those eventually. I really like that the iron plates exit the factory and then re-enter. I thought that was fun. And then this part is a little bit cramped, but if you look down, you can basically see everything that's going on. And then for the roofs, I made these things a blueprint. So it's just a bunch of 1 meter walls, and they're all 1 meter spaced out, just nudging them over. I tried to avoid this stuff as much as I could instead of just building straight through it. It does clip into it a little bit, but for the most part, I got it to kind of drop down and avoid most of it. Try to work around it as best I could. And then up here with those blueprints for the ceiling, they just felt just a little too flat, I guess. So I added some beams all the way around it, and just a couple of the 4 meter signs. Instead of making this factory even taller and then dealing with the smoke on the inside, it was just easier just to drop this thing down and then have those come out the top. Since I'm using 2 meter foundations here, I just had the frame floors clipped halfway through, and then that way I could easily clip it straight into the foundations so that I could get that pattern all the way through easily. And then all around the edge, I used label signs. And normally, if you were to do them right next to each other, you see the line of where each one stops and starts. So instead of having them right next to each other, if they're just clipped into each other even a little bit, like the half meter nudge, those lines just go away and you just get one nice smooth line all the way across. And that's my packaged rocket fuel factory. For the train station, it's pretty basic. It just looks really busy because of the triple frame windows. Just have a lot going on, I feel like. And then down here, I just use basic walls. Just use a stripe of that kind of cool blue. And this is just how different colors look in this game, depending on what material it is. Because this is all using this swatch 18. So as you can see, those are showing up red. They're already painted swatch 18. These are also painted using swatch 18. And just so drastically different. But these are painted concrete, and that's fix-it walls. And those are the shelf beams. And at least now it has some walls, windows, and a roof. I went with a glass roof up here because there's still actually a lot of oil out here. I have no idea what, if anything, I'll use it for. I still haven't used any of the oil in the Spire Coast, so there is still a lot of oil in the world that I have not touched. But if I do end up needing it or stuff I'm producing here to go somewhere else, and I need to add more train stations, eventually I'm going to run out of space going this way, and the easiest thing would be to go vertical and just add train stations on top of here. So if that's the case, I'll end up probably swapping out a lot of these glass foundations, but if everything's flat up here, then it just becomes so much easier. Tour over? Now it's my favorite part. Watching the factory come to life. So to do that, it's going to be pretty easy. I just need to make one power connection from here to there, and that will power on all of the machines inside. Now, the one thing I did ahead of time, we come all the way over here, I turned on the oil extractor already. So the oil pipes are completely full, but because the machines aren't powered on, they haven't received any of it yet. Once I connect the power, I'm also going to delete the smart splitter so that the load balancing gets started. And I think really the longest thing I have to wait on is the iron plates to get all the way over there. That'll get all of the machines except for the very last two started. But because I'm dealing with so many aluminum ingots, that'll fill up the machines in less than a minute. I'm going to wait until I start making the rocket fuel to get those sent in. And here we go. And that's 150 packaged rocket fuel per minute. Obviously, we've got to test it out now. Change my preferred fuel to packaged rocket fuel. Oh wow. I forgot just how quickly you can go up. It does burn a whole lot faster. Oh, yep. Well, if I didn't run into my own catwalk, I could have made it to that next floor. Let's give that another shot from the ground. I wasn't going to quite make it up to the next one, but making it up to the third floor is pretty good. And it sure does let you go so much faster than the packaged biofuel. I think there's still a lot of cases where I probably still prefer the packaged liquid biofuel, even over the rocket fuel. But for exploring, I definitely think I'm going to be using this. It's a big upgrade over the turbo fuel because the turbo fuel, it just burns so quickly. The rocket fuel is at least more manageable in my opinion. The ionized one is definitely what I ultimately want, but hey, you need the rocket fuel to be able to make the ionized anyways, so we're one step closer. And that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. And a special thank you to those that like, comment, and even share the videos. It really does help the channel, so thank you very much. I went from about 25,000 to over 111,000 megawatts of power production. I'm not sure if that will actually be enough for everything I want to do in the end, but it's certainly enough to get to where I have everything unlocked and I have all options available. With the byproduct compacted coal, I was able to add a little bit more crude oil and aluminum, and now have more packaged rocket fuel than I know what to do with. Now I can move on to permanent factories for these new items I keep hand feeding machines to make. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.